Okay, so we got these trumpets all sandblasted and painted. There's one more part I need to remove before I start to reassemble these things, and that's this axle seal. And I left that in there during the sandblasting and paint process is to give me something a little bit easier to tape down and mask off. So now it's ready to come out. So to take it out, we're going to use our slide hammer with basically a 2-jaw attachment on it to reach in there and grab the seal and pull it. And hopefully it'll cooperate. Sometimes these seals want to fold up on you instead of just coming out, so we'll see how it works. And it worked perfect. Now there's a little bit of dirt and grime right there I'll clean up. One thing to note, whenever you put your slide hammer in there, you need to be in these two grooves. Either here and here, or here and here. Because that is actually part of the cast iron, and you don't want to pull on that and break it. Alright, so I got the old seal out. And as you can see, I've come in here and put some new Gliptol in here. It's that nice red paint. So now it's time to install our new seal. Now, since this is a Rowcrop tractor, these seals are specific to a Rowcrop. And it took me a while to find these. Ended up getting some SKF seals. So the number for this one is a 17841. Well, in the box, this seal here is actually a national seal with a number 450285. Now, since this seal has paint on it, I'm not going to put any silicone or anything on it. And whenever we install it, we want to install it with the lettering facing out. And basically, there should be a spring behind here. It's kind of covered, but there's a spring behind it. We want that spring down so that when we slide our axle in, this will actually expand around our axle. So it's pretty simple to install it. I'm just going to stick it down in there and kind of square it up by hand. Take our seal installer and just drive it in until it's flush. Even though these seals are specific to the Rowcrop axle tube, your regular utility type tractors are going to install the exact same way. It's just a different seal. And it's nice and solid thud. We know we're fully installed. So that's all we're going to do right here for now. On the Rowcrop there is an O-ring that goes right here. At the last check, that O-ring was like $45 from New Holland, which is ridiculous. So I found a run-of-the-mill O-ring that I'm going to put there, and I'll explain that once I actually put the drop box back onto the tractor. The next thing I'm going to install is going to be our brake rod bushing. These bushings are the exact same that was in our center section housing. Number is 78-2477. And they're going to install just like our other one with our bushing installer. So this bushing is going to install right here. There is a freeze plug, Welch plug, expansion plug, whatever you want to call it, down in here. If yours was not leaking, don't worry about it. If it was, just knock it out and put a new one in from the back. Mine were not leaking, so I'm not going to worry about them. We're going to take the bushing and our driver and just kind of square everything up. Get in there, make sure it's started nice and even. Then we're going to drive it until it's flush. And this bushing driver, I don't know if it's me or using the wrong size, but be careful with it. because once it starts to get close, this end really wants to grab a hold, and it can get stuck. So I just flipped it around backwards just to fully seat it. And if you want, you can even go to a little bit bigger one for this step. And that way, whenever it hits flush, it's going to hit your casting. You hear it change pitch, we know it's flush and fully installed. Seal is installed, our glip tall's on, and this bushing is installed. It's now time to flip it over. We'll install our new link pins here. Well, they're not new. I just replated them. We'll install our link pins. We'll put our new bearing race in it. And our new thrust block on this housing. Once again, it's not new, it's just cleaned up. This thrust block on a Rowcrop model tractor, since our ring gear is on the right hand side, this is going to go on the right hand side. On the utility type tractors, our ring gear is on the left, thrust block will go on the left. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to install is the new bearing race. Now on this tractor, the bearing race is a number 3920. But pretty self-explanatory. Just like the other parts, we're going to set it in there, and then we're going to just hammer it in until it's flush. Now, me being a dummy, I left my brass punch at work. That's what you really want to use on this. Your other option is aluminum, a soft-faced hammer, or very gently with a steel hammer. And that's kind of what I'm going to use, and just try not to booger everything up. And I don't have a installer big enough to cover that. This is literally the biggest one that I have, and it falls right through. So I pretty much just have to work my way around it and make sure it's seated evenly as best I can. Which one thing, this housing's been sitting outside for a while from where I did the glip tall. So it's nice and warm, and this race has been in my basement, so I kind of got the heat working with me here. Which might be something you have to do. Okay, now I have it flush there, but we want it flush underneath here. And this is very important to seat it all the way down, because if you don't seat it all the way down, our bearing preload on our differential is going to be too much. I know on some of the tractors in the manuals they say to stack up gaskets here to increase and decrease your preload. I've always been told don't double gaskets, even though this manual calls for it. So I'm going to try to use just one. So for that reason, this seal, or not this seal, but this bearing race needs to be driven all the way flush underneath here. And once you get to this point where you can't hit it with a hammer, you're going to have to get a punch and just go around this edge until it's solid. So that sounded pretty solid already. So I really need a mirror to stick in here and look. But just make sure it sets all the way down nice and solid. And usually you can hear the pitch change. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is install this thrust block. And it'll only go one way. If you set it like this, you can see everything's inside of the radius here, that would be in our center section. If you turn it around backwards, I'm past the trumpet. So it's only going to go one way. We'll install these bolts. They got lock washers on them, so there's no need for Loctite. And once again, these are original bolts that have just been cleaned up and replated. Whenever we torque these bolts down, we're going to go 25 to 30 foot-pounds. So being the originals, I'm going to do just 25. So now I saved the fun part for last. And there's a couple of reasons I say that. One being the torque spec. The torque spec on these guys, for our pins, is 150 foot-pounds. It's not that it's hard to get 150, it's hard to get 150 on something standing up like this. So, we might have to give it a couple of ugga-duggas with the impact and just let it go. And something I'm going to do, this axle here, I believe it was this guy, was actually loose and it was leaking. And I don't know how long the previous owner ran it like that. So since I have a steel pin and a cast iron housing, it probably wallered it out some. So since this is such a pain in the butt place to get to, I'm going to take and put a little bit of Loctite on it. And I don't mean the threads. I'm actually going to put it Loctite right here. And the reason being, this is a tapered fit. So it should fit like a ball joint and tighten up and be nice and tight. But with that possible damage, if I put Loctite on here, and this is just low strength Loctite, it's not the red stuff or anything. Well, this stuff is red, but it's medium strength. I'm basically just going to put a little spot all the way around it to just seal it up. Because once I ram that in there and tighten it up, that Loctite will set up in the absence of air. You know, better than, say, RTV or something of that nature. So that should seal it up. And I'm going to have to clean out these bores a little bit. I still got a little bit of sandblast sand in there. But the way that our service manual wants us to install it is real particular on it. It's not just stick them in here and tighten them down. You have to stick them in, hit them with a hammer and stuff. I'll walk you through that process as I do it. Which I got to be sure I put these in the right location since they're different. Yeah, on a regular type tractor, like a all-purpose, your pin's going to look similar to this one. Only this will not be tapered. This will be flat for your lift arm to go onto. See, the Rowcrop tractor actually has this bracket on it. And the reason this one's painted and ready to go is because I could not get this pin out. So this one's just going to have to be all bolted on at once. So I have to be sure that I get those in the right location. This bracket is off of the left side. You can tell because right here's where the link would go. And that pin goes into the tractor. So my short pin is going to be towards the rear. So on this axle, that's going to be on this side. So that bore feels kind of smooth, but I don't want to risk it. Because like I said, these things are in such a pain in the butt place to get. If you put it all back together and it still leaks. So we want to try and take care of it on one go. One thing I want to add before I start this process on this. If you have never changed a ball joint or a tapered joint of any kind, whenever you tighten these nuts down, they're a castle nut. And a cotter pin is going to go in through here to lock this nut down through this hole. When you tighten these down, and say you hit 150 foot-pounds of torque on this guy, and say this nut is not lined up with that hole, do not loosen it. you're going to want to tighten it a little bit more until you can line this hole up. Because if you loosen this, taper is going to get loose. So always tighten these tapered joints. Alright, so have a small line of Loctite on there. We're going to stick it into the rear, since this is the short pin. We're going to put our washer on it, and then we're going to put our nut on it. This is an 1 1/16" socket, by the way. Okay, so the problem I have right this minute is this one's wanting to spin real bad because this lock nut is so tight. Okay, so this ran up right now. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it one good time with our soft blow hammer, or twice, whatever, don't really matter. And that's just to help try to seat it some. Now, like I said, I'm pretty sure I can't pull this to 150 standing up. So I'm going to go ahead and get my impact, about 90 psi pressure. Now I have this hole lined up and it's ready to install the cotter pin. And that pin's nice and tight. The cotter pin is a 5/32 by 1 1/4". And I kind of messed mine up because mine's pointing that way. So I don't have a whole lot of room to get this in there. So I'm going to have to finagle it probably with some pliers. Nope, there it went. And once you get your cotter pin in there, just spread the legs apart. Just spread your legs apart kind of like that, and then we'll do the same thing right here. So now to install the other pin. This pin has two different tapers on it. There's a long taper and a short taper. The long taper is the one that's going to go into our housing. And if you're unsure, you can stick that in there and see it comes through nicely. Stick this guy in there, it barely sticks through. So plus, it matches the taper on our other pin. So it's the same process for this pin as it was for the other. The only difference is the taper, right? So we're just going to take some Loctite. And make sure we get a complete bead across there. Stick it up in. The washer, they're kind of trapezoid shape almost if you look at them from the side. The small part of the trapezoid needs to go down. I'll put the nut back on it. Go ahead and give it a rap with the hammer. And run it down with the impact. Hit it again. and then hammer it a little bit with the impact. I went too far, so I'm going to have to go a little stronger on this one. Because, like I say, you don't back up a tapered joint. And before somebody says something, yes, I know I'm supposed to use an impact socket, but I don't have an 1/16" impact socket here at my house. So, same scenario. Put in your cotter pin and bend the legs. And there's both of our link pins installed. And that's what they look like underneath. So now that big fork arm will just slide on here, and we'll do the same design or same sequence right here as far as tightening this down. I will not put Loctite on this because there's no oil here. So the Loctite is just to try to seal it here and here. But now this housing is ready to go back onto the center section. And since this is a right side housing on the Rowcrop, our ring gear and carrier assembly will be first. And this is going to be the start of the tractor actually going back together. So, exciting times are ahead.